WSBT, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. The Ravens sign on the dotted line with Tavon Young to end last week, and we'll spend this week mostly the brass in Indianapolis in the Combine. Luke, I'm going to be seeing John Harbaugh give a speech next Monday night for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes with my good friend Frank Kelly out on the west side. Between now and then, they are going to be spending a lot of time with a lot of young football players, and you and I are abstaining from Indianapolis this year. I'm calling us conscientious objectors to pretty much the NFL draft stuff, and it's better on television at this point. So we will be watching, and I don't even know exactly what we're watching for because I don't see a specific position or place of absolute crazy need. I see a football team in need of finding 4 or 5 or 6 more pretty good football players in this draft, right?
Well, I think you're hoping to find 1 or 2 guys that are better than pretty good.
Sure.
I think that's still kind of a long-term 30,000-foot look at this football team, and you hope Lamar Jackson becomes that special talent. Marlon Humphrey looks like he's on the verge of being that kind of special talent at the cornerback position, but we've talked about it for the longest time, and it's kind of ironic now knowing that Le'Veon Bell's out the door with Pittsburgh, and Antonio Brown could be out the door, although I'm still skeptical they're going to find a proper trade partner, given some of the baggage of contracts.
Yeah, what's the proper trade partner when he can't go home, right?
Right. But my thought for that we've talked about for how many years now, when you've tried to size up Ravens versus Steelers, really came down to those 2 players being the elite of the elite at their positions, and the Ravens just not having that elite talent other than maybe Justin Tucker at kicker. So I think you're always looking to see if you can hit a home run. That's always something that you want to do. You can't force that to happen, of course. You're at the mercy of where you're scheduled to pick, what potential deals are available to you to move up or move back, collect more picks. The Ravens picked up, as expected, a 3rd-round compensatory pick. On Friday, they announced those. Ryan Jensen, that free agent departure led to that, which was the anticipated outcome for him with the deal that he signed with Tampa Bay. But this week, I don't know if there's necessarily a need that jumps out dramatically, although I think you could argue interior linemen. I think you could argue wide receiver. Depending on what happens with C.J. Mosley, you could talk inside linebacker.
And look, a lot of things could happen with the money they have between now and the end of April. They could lose Mosley and have Le'Veon Bell for all. I mean, I'm making that up, but I mean, a lot of parts could be moving between now and April 25th, 26th, right?
Right, and that's where there is some more intrigue as far as how this is all going to shake out. I mean, if you look at first day of free agency when they officially complete the Flacco trade, at that point in time, they'll have roughly $30 million in cap space. Now, mind you, much of that goes into retaining your exclusive rights free agents, retaining your restricted free agents, assuming you want to retain those guys. And, of course, there's some debate as far as someone like Alex Collins, for example. But so it's not as though they just have $30 million to blow on the open market and to just use all of that to re-sign their unrestricted free agents. But it is a sizable portion compared to what they've typically operated with this time of year. So we've talked about this a lot as far as they have more space naturally because they are saving $10.5 million in cap space with the Flacco trade. Now, keep in mind, Joe's contract still is going to count for $16 million in dead money this year. So it's not as though it's a clean slate, but it is more advantageous than it's been in a while. But how do you go about spending that? And if late last week was any indication, with the Ravens choosing to re-sign Tavon Young a year before he hits free agency to a 3-year extension, although not exactly a cheap deal. I think that was kind of the expectation when it first came out. This is very much at best an at-market kind of contract, but I think Eric DeCosta tipped his hand late last month when he said that they're not really looking to completely change their philosophy as far as free agents, although they'll certainly keep their eyes open towards the right opportunities, but they want to be in a position where they re-sign some of their younger, good players to extensions before they hit the free agency when one, of course, the risk goes up that you can lose them, and two, in most cases, you're going to be spending more money then. Now, am I convinced that Tavon Young's getting more money a year from now? Not necessarily. I think this is very much a projectable kind of deal. I think they're looking for him to get better than he's played to this point. I think he's a solid player. I think he's certainly had his moments. I like the player, but I think the Ravens are very much paid on anticipating him getting better, and ideally, that's what you want. You don't want to be in a position
you speculate on guys that you feel good about betting on, right? And part of that really speaks to the outside versus the inside on Lamar Jackson. When they go all in, they go all in. They're all in, right? I mean, like, all in is here's the money, we love you, we're going to keep you. And, that brings us to C.J. Mosley, who they never did that with, right? And as we've watched Manny Machado wear a Padre hat, right? Like, that's what happens when you don't fall in love with the player early. We could see, 2 weeks from now, with C.J. Mosley running around with a Jets hat on or whatever, right?
Well, it's possible. I mean, every day that you get closer to free agency, the chances, the likelihood of reaching a long-term agreement before the market opens, it becomes less and less. I mean, it just becomes less likely. If you're looking at this through an objective lens, not purple-colored glasses, if you're C.J. Mosley, you're so close now to hitting the open market. I almost feel you're doing yourself a disservice not to at least see what's out there. And
if the Ravens were going to wow you, they would have done that by now.
Yeah,
right?
You would think, right? I mean, I guess the one, and we've touched on this, so it's not as though this is a brand new portion of the discussion. But with this past week, with the franchise tag window opening up, which runs until early March, there's always that carrot. I don't know if carrot's the right word, maybe just that can push negotiations with the thought of he doesn't want to have a one-year contract. The Ravens don't want to be tendering him a $15 million salary for 2019. It's really not the best-case scenario for either side other than just, I guess you can make an argument if you're close to a deal, it buys you time, and it's kind of a, hey, we're going to work this out. We have until July then to strike a long-term deal, but as we've seen, and I mentioned Le'Veon Bell a few minutes ago, sometimes it doesn't always play out the way you want it to when you use the tag. I don't anticipate that at this point, although certainly we'll hear from Eric DeCosta in Indianapolis this week, and I'm sure that question, that topic will be broached again. But I think in the case of Mosley, it's difficult to really, truly figure out what his market value is because, all right, you can say he's not as good as Luke Kuechly, he's not as good as Bobby Wagner, and I'd be fine with people saying that. I wouldn't say C.J. Mosley's the best middle linebacker in the NFL. I think he's top 5, though, and at first blush you would just say, okay, well, he should make less than what Luke Kuechly's making, which is an average annual value of a little over $12 million per year. Problem is, Luke Kuechly signed that deal back in 2015. The cap has gone up quite a bit since then. So, really, when you look at where C.J. Mosley falls into the hierarchy of inside linebackers, what's it going to be? I think he can easily make an argument for $13 million per year, and if he hits the open market, what's not to say some team that has way more cap space than the Baltimore Ravens and is looking for a young defensive leader, a standout performer at inside linebacker, what's not to say that they're not going to offer him a deal that averages $15.5 million per year. And if that's the case, then I think the Ravens fairly can take some pause to say, is he a $15 million a year player? And I'd be hard-pressed to say, yes, he definitely is, while also acknowledging that that's a tough piece to lose when you're talking about Terrell Suggs maybe being back one more year, maybe not. Same thing with Eric Weddle. So can you afford to lose that much leadership? And, oh, yeah, you're talking about a player who's still in his 20s, still someone that conceivably could get a little bit better and at least maintain what he's been the last few years. So I think C.J. Mosley's just in a tricky spot as far as valuing him because inside linebackers haven't really gotten paid over the last few years, but of the inside linebackers to hit the market over the last few years, I think you can make a very strong argument C.J. Mosley's the best of that tier because Kuechly and Bobby Wagner, those were extensions. Those weren't situations where they hit the market and suddenly 32 teams were conceivably bidding for their services.
Luke Jones is here. He, of course, can be found Baltimore Luke and Luke at WNST.net. I want to give some love to all of our WNST sponsors. Let's start with LifeBridge Health Sports Medicine Institute in Owings Mills. We're going to talk to Dr. Kevin Crutchfield this week. Had a great chat last week with Dr. Craig Bennett about all things elbows and ACLs and injuries in the combine this week. Learn more about what they do. Stop by and see them at Foundry Row in Owings Mills. I've been chatting with the docs every week. You've seen Cal Ripken out on the billboards. Even heard him here on the commercials. Find out what they do. They're in Owings Mills. They are the game plan and the new game plan for sports-related injuries to help you, maybe your children, maybe your grandchildren, maybe you if something happens as you get older and it happens to people like me. Aches and pains. LifeBridge Health Sports Medicine Institute. They're helping my wife as well with the Parisi folks to do a half marathon, so we're appreciative of that. Also, our friends at Strategic Factory. I have my Strategic Factory cup here, creating your masterpiece. I'm getting Keith on the program this week. They do marketing and printing and promotional goods of all kinds, all in one shop. They're in Owings Mills. If you wear it like a shirt, a hat, a cup, want to market your company, you need a strategy to put it together. Make sure this stuff doesn't go to waste. Strategic Factory is the way to do that. In Owings Mills, you can find them at strategicfactory.com. We'll always be telling you about them as well. As our friends at Fremont Mortgage. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. You need Carl Delmont and our friends at Fremont Mortgage. They've been there forever, doing it the right way. If you're in the market, make sure you're checking them out. Fremont Mortgage and Fremont.com. Buying, selling, thinking about it. They have the education online for you so that let them do all the heavy lifting. There's a lot of laws and all this crazy stuff that goes on. Get some folks you can trust. Carl Delmont and our friends, they are the friends you can trust to do that. Luke Jones is here. He is Baltimore Luke and Luke at WNST.net. We're going to get to some baseball. We're going to get to some Terps. Plenty of stuff going on here as we sort of turn the corner and get ready for March Madness and spring training. But this week is about the Combine, I think, exclusively if you're a Ravens fan, to say, how will this look differently? Of course, Eric was a college scouting director at one point. This was his baby for a long, long time in the aftermath of Phil Savage. So this is... He understands the importance of this, but also he now will be one of the guys dragging on, doing contracts and doing different stuff. And I know in past years he's done that. You and I well know it begins there in the coffee shops at 6 in the morning and ends in the bars sometime around 2 in the morning, that the business of the NFL really gets percolating here this week. And this is where deals are done, rumors are done, drafts are done, relationships are made and formed over a beer sometimes. Sometimes it's, sitting in that stadium like Bill Belichick and John Harbaugh when Belichick recommended Harbaugh to Steve Bisciotti. It was relationship born of the Combine. It's a football week for football people, right?
It really is. I mean, you kind of look to this week and Senior Bowl as two of those opportunities where it is very much a convention for the Senior Bowl's very much a convention for coaches trying to move up the ladder, trying to catch on with another organization. And in Indianapolis, as much as we're all going to be paying attention to some degree, I mean, some people love sitting there and watching hours of coverage on NFL Network. I can't say, personally speaking, I've ever been fascinated to just sit there and watch guys run the 40 and different drills like that. But I think there's plenty of intrigue to see, for example, what does DK Metcalf run in the 40 as far as a wide receiver who many people have linked in a speculative fashion to the Baltimore Ravens? But to your point, it's really what goes on behind the scenes. It's really what's going on in downtown Indianapolis from the hours of anywhere from 9 p.m. to 2 in the morning. It really is. I mean, the coaches, they're in meetings with players,
we've watched
interviewing players, and they'll finish up their night at 10:30, 11 o'clock, and then some of them will go to bed, but plenty of them that are trying to conduct business, and many executives, all of the agents around the league are in Indianapolis, and this is really, even though some of this stuff has gone on behind closed doors already, this is really the back channel start of free agency. More so than the, quote, negotiating window.
This isn't the tampering period. I know it's not. No one would tamper right now because they offer you a free tampering period. Why would you tamper before you are allowed to tamper?
Everyone tampers. I mean, that's just the reality. Anyone that you talk to who really understands this business, because you speak in generalities. You speak in hypotheticals. hypothetically, when this individual hits the market, would this hypothetical amount be attractive to them? So that stuff goes on, and there's going to be plenty of that with Eric DaCosta, with Pat Moriarty, who, of course, is the Ravens cap guy and contract negotiator. They're going to be talking, I'm sure, with some of their own free agents and agents of some of their own players, where they're weighing whether they're going to keep them, whether they're going to work out a renegotiated contract, a pay cut, incentive-laden deals, whatever the case might be. That's the kind of business that really goes on in Indianapolis, and we're not privy to most of that. But when these deals are then consummated in a few weeks, there isn't necessarily a paper trail, but it's not as though those deals all just come to fruition within 30 minutes of the start of free agency on, March 13th. These are conversations that take place over a number of weeks, and much of that groundwork is laid in Indianapolis. So even though we won't necessarily know it and learn it this week, there is going to be plenty of relevant things going down for the Ravens this week that are going to shape them, not just for 2019, but even beyond that, as this team is clearly in a position of transition. And to your point, Eric DaCosta, his first combine being the guy in charge, definitely a little, he won't admit it, but certainly a different mindset for him, a little different perception he'll have walking around Indianapolis and meeting up with agents.
You know, one thing, and look, we can get back onto the Ravens, and we'll talk a lot of Ravens, and it's all we've talked the last couple of weeks with Flacco, other than some Broncos. I've thrown that in there as well. But, this is where they all get together, and Flacco's going to be a Bronco now. So had he not been dealt, we would be in the middle of still talking about the Redskins or the Jaguars or who's going to offer what and where is Nick Foles going and what's the rest of the marketplace as these things start to happen. But I think the bigger part of this week for me, much like I think the draft is that way, Luke, is sort of, dude, Mike Mayock's running the Raiders, right? You know what I mean? Like, this guy LaFleur is now like a head coach, right? And the Browns have now shaken out who their leader is going to be. And, Adam Gase is no longer in one place. He's in another place, So these moving around of leaders and football player pickers, I mean, dude, Marvin Lewis isn't running the Bengals. Like, wake me, right? Like, Marvin Lewis was doing AAF football with Rod Woodson in a studio for no one 2 nights ago. I witnessed it on the internet. I wasn't watching it. I was watching pictures of it. But there's some weirdness going on, and this is the time not to mention that, Bobby Kraft is, gonna had a rough weekend, and we didn't even mention that. But, boy, Ravens aside, just forget the Ravens. Put them in a basket. You and I could sit here for an hour or two and just talk about what's going on in this league right now, where suddenly Mike Tomlin's the guy on the hot seat, right? And the Steelers are suddenly the team in decline, where 2 of their star players decided to say F you to the Ravens. You know what I mean? Like, or to the Steelers, I should say. Can you imagine that happening in the Ravens organization? Ed Reed and Ray Lewis both getting antsy and crazy in 2009 and blowing the whole place up. You know what I mean? Like, that's sort of happened in Pittsburgh. I mean, they had the talent there to win championships, and they were put together to do all that, but they had a bunch of guys with 10-cent heads, quite frankly.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly some of that, and some bad fortune for them with, I suppose, with Ryan Shazier.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be fascinating to see what happens there. I mean, I am still not remotely convinced that any team is going to give Le'Veon Bell what he truly wants from a contractual standpoint.
Which was last year's money.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think he's going to get paid, because I think there are enough teams out there that have enough stupid cap room, to borrow a phrase from Philly's ownership, stupid money. Teams that have stupid money out there, stupid cap room, where they will give Bell a deal that will kind of reset the market, but to the point where he's going to be made whole from last year, I'm still very skeptical about that. What we do know, and the Pittsburgh's front office has already confirmed, they're not going to slap the transition tag on him. So he's gone. He's not going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. Brown, we'll see. Again, I think you still look at the cap ramifications for that, and there have been plenty of players over the years that have requested trades. It looked like they were done, and they wind up back with their same team. Now, not saying that's going to happen here, but and I used this example with you a couple weeks ago. Ray Lewis requested a trade in 2006. You can Google it. You can go back and find a Baltimore Sun article on Ray Lewis with sources that he wanted to be traded. And then they drafted Haloti Ngata, and it was kumbaya again soon after that. But to your point, going back to just how crazy this league is with all the different change, I mean, this is the first, like I said, Senior Bowl to a degree, but this is the first time where the entire league, so to speak, is gathered, where all these coaching staffs are set. The Bengals finally have a defensive coordinator. They finally figured that out this week after being turned down a few times.
And they're all 0-0, literally, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting. I mean, we're spending so much time talking about the Steelers. What about the Cleveland Browns now? I mean, if you're the Cleveland Browns walking around, you have a quarterback who...
I still don't take them seriously, but all right. I'm going to let you have your 2 minutes. Go ahead. You have at it. I'll consider this comedy.
They won 7 games last year. I mean, you got to give them some credit. My goodness. I mean, look, I'm not saying they're winning the Super Bowl.
I don't like Baker Mayfield, so this is going to be fun for me.
Well, Baker Mayfield's good. I mean, you can not like him all you want. He's good.
I'm going to enjoy rooting against him is what I'm going to do.
That's fine, but my point is...
I think he's a better quarterback than Lamar Jackson, so do 31 other teams, by the way.
And, I mean, that's right.
Fact.
I mean, we'll see what happens there. I mean, it's going to be fun. We saw it Week 17. It was a blast seeing these two rookies get after it and playing in a meaningful game. That more meaningful for the Ravens, but still a meaningful game nonetheless. But my point is, while we're talking about Pittsburgh being in such turmoil and looking like they're on the decline and looking like they've fallen back to the rest of the pack in the AFC North, you have the Browns who, you'd have to admit, at the very least, they look a hell of a lot better than they have at any point since they came back into the league in 1999. There actually appears to be potentially light at the end of the tunnel with some of the talent they've collected. It looks like they have a quarterback. They have a lot of cap space. They still have draft picks.
Well, they have a legitimate guy picking the groceries. Let's start with that, right?
But that's my point. They actually look like a legitimate NFL franchise is what I'm saying, other than just being a punchline as far as...
Well, you could say that about the Orioles, too, if you're measuring the accolades of Mike Elias and Sig Mejdal. I mean, you hire guys that are competent people. That doesn't mean it always works out, but you have a far better chance of doing that than you had with Sashi, whatever his name was, right?
Well, I mean, and I will say this, Sashi did give them a ton of picks. I mean, there was something to part of that. But some of the moves, of course, you get to a point where you're not winning any games. I mean, you know what's going to happen. But I think with the Browns, I just think it's interesting from the standpoint of what's the perception of potential free agents looking at them now? What's the perception that agents have of the Browns? We've talked a lot about free agent wide receivers. Would they want to play with Lamar Jackson? Not because of Lamar per se, but because of what this offense looked like in the second half of last season and knowing that this is going to be a run-first team. At the same time, if you're the Browns with a lot of cap space and you're a free agent wide receiver, not that they necessarily are targeting that, but you look at Baker Mayfield and say, he might be someone I'd like to play with and maybe be successful with. So I just think you're seeing a potential shift in this division with maybe the Ravens and the Browns kind of being the teams that are looked at a little more fondly. I wouldn't yet bury the Steelers. I think that would be unwise. As much as you're not buying into the Browns just yet, I'm not ready to bury the Steelers yet either. But it does certainly feel different than it has over the last 4 or 5 years where it's been the Steelers, the Ravens kind of on their heels trying to catch them, Bengals kind of in that same spot, and then asking if the Browns are going to win 0, 1, or 2 games in that upcoming season. Now it kind of feels like Ravens, maybe the Browns, kind of somewhere there, Steelers. Maybe you put those 3 on the same level, and I think it's the Bengals that kind of look like the team that has a ways to go and looks like they're in transition, and who knows, maybe they're going to be rebooting at the quarterback position, whether it's this year or sometime in the near future.
Well, what the hell? They've rebooted everywhere else, right?
Yeah, I mean well, that's the thing. I mean, if we're talking about the Ravens, if the Ravens rebooted with Joe Flacco, you're telling me the Bengals haven't thought about doing that with Andy Dalton at this point? I mean, do you really think he's getting you to a Super Bowl? Probably not. So, maybe they're a team that, and I follow a number of Bengals analysts and reporters on Twitter, and there are definitely individuals who say now's the time for them to be looking for their quarterback of the future. So this is a really interesting time in this division. I think there's just so much transition going on. But
the Ravens signed up for stability. That's what they did with Eric and John.
Sure.
So at least they have that part of it together. I mean, I did a national show earlier tonight, and we were talking about that and saying, hey, they said this is the way Steve wants to run the organization with guys who've done it for 20 years, guys he's comfortable with. I mean, Harbaugh's working on 12, 13, 14 years here. Harbaugh's going to be here a decade and a half. Like, it's, that's kind of an incredible thing for both of them, for him and for Steve, but it has to work. You know what I mean? They have to go out and win football games, and I think you and I are scratching our head right now to say, where is the talent? Where are they? Are they ascending with Lamar Jackson? Where are they with these veteran players? The next 6 weeks, 8 weeks, boy, we're going to get a lot of answers here. They don't play a whole lot of football this time of the year, but it's interesting on a day-by-day basis if you follow it.
Yeah, and I think, we're not going to get answers as far as how good they're going to be, but I think direction-wise we'll get a much bigger, much better idea on where it is. I mean, I think the Tavon Young contract clearly gives you an indication that they're a big believer in him. Do I think he's a guy you're building around necessarily? I don't know if I'd go that far. I think he's a solid player. I think you want him to get a little bit better. I think last year he was good at times, and also, and the groin was kind of an issue for him, but I think it's a clear signal that they want to keep more guys like him, and you assume Matt Judon, maybe Michael Pierce, maybe Patrick Owasso. Where does C.J. Mosley fit into that? Marlon Humphrey certainly would fit into that conversation a year or two from now. So, and you have to pay these guys to keep them. And I know DaCosta talked at his introductory press conference about the Ravens wanting to keep more of their younger players off the market so they're not losing them or they're not overpaying for them. Now, I'll be totally honest, I'm not sure how many of those guys you can really point to over the last 4 or 5 years and say, boy, it was a real bummer that they lost that guy. I think Kelechi Osemele comes to mind right away. Beyond that, okay, maybe a Kyle Juszczyk, maybe a Rick Wagner.
Well, you would have loved to have kept Ryan Jensen at $6 million a year, not at 12.
Well,
right?
but let's be very fair about this. Ryan Jensen didn't start until his last year with the Ravens. If they had given him $6 million that year before he had even been a starter, we all would have been saying they were cuckoo, and I don't think they even knew he was.
No. I just mean guys getting away, just in general, and what they got away for. You love all those players. You didn't love the price. You didn't love what they got paid. Any of them.
But here's the thing.
And if the Ravens even had the money, they still wouldn't have spent it on any of those guys because they felt like it was a great player, nice player. It was too rich for their blood.
And that's kind of my point. I don't know who they really, like I said, Osemele, who I think won Pro Bowl with the Raiders, if not 2. He certainly played at a Pro Bowl level for a couple years for them. Now, I know injuries kind of caught up with him a little bit this past year, but I guess my point is it's great to hold on to good young players, but it's got to make sense. It can't be someone that you're overpaying for. I think 2 years into the Brandon Williams contract, most people, I'm not saying everybody, but there are many people who feel the Ravens overpaid for Brandon Williams. So you got to be careful with that. If Tavon Young, if how he played this past year is the best that he plays and doesn't really get better than that, this is just kind of an okay deal at best, I think. So you're still, and this isn't a I want to be clear about this. This isn't a perfect science. These guys have to take steps and continue to be motivated and stay healthy and continue to want to have a growth mindset and get better and continue to work hard. And players do that, and other players get paid and are just okay after that or have a run of injuries. So I just think it's going to be really interesting for the Ravens in that way. Now that, and this even came up on Friday during Young's press conference. I can't remember if it was Harbaugh or DaCosta. They made mention again about not having a big bloated rookie or not having a big bloated quarterback contract and having a rookie quarterback contract that gives you more flexibility. But that said, you still got to spend that money on the right players. That's what it really comes down to. And one thing you and I have talked about quite a bit over the last 4 or 5 years is the Ravens having a lot of nice players, but not having enough of those truly high-impact, difference-making.
This is where I always say, 3 out of the last 5 years, their best player has been their kicker.
Yeah. Yeah,
and that's a high praise for Justin Tucker. It is high damnation for everybody else.
Yeah, and you can only and look. It's going to get really old quick if we're going to continue to just hear about Joe Flacco's contract not being their big issue anymore. There were a lot of things that the Ravens could have done better beyond just lamenting Flacco's cap figure. Let's not use any revisionist history here as we go on. So it's going to be fascinating with them being in transition. To your point, Steve Bisciotti is clearly valuing continuity, but it comes down to this: John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta, to a great degree. I don't know if it's 100% defining, but it's darn close. It's going to come down to how Lamar Jackson fares. If he doesn't develop, and the Ravens are going 6-10, 7-9, and they have some mediocre drafts like they did at various points over the last 5-6 years, then we might be talking about a new regime 4 years from now. But in the meantime, they do have resources at their disposal. They need Lamar Jackson to get better and grow on his own. They need to put good talent around him at wide receiver, offensive line, running back, tight end, the whole gambit. They need to have a defense that continues to play at a high level if they want to try to play this run-first formula that they used to a dramatic degree last year. So there are a lot of moving parts here, and it's very intriguing. I'm very much interested by it. I think it's going to be a very fascinating look at what the Ravens are doing, which, face it, they're going against the grain to a degree, at the very least, with what Greg Roman wants to do with the offense compared to all of these pass-happy teams in the league, and all of the analytics suggesting that passing is the way to go in the modern game. So I'm interested in that regard. If the Ravens can find some players that are against the mold, so to speak. I mean, Lamar Jackson breaks the mold. Let's be totally honest about that. And that's a compliment to him. But he's got.
Yeah, they are trying to do this a completely different way. So much so that as we go to the draft, you know what I mean? They need pulling guards. I mean, you know what I mean? They need wide receivers that can crack down and block.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They have different needs than other teams, which may make for interesting drafts. I mean, Belichick has drafted left-handed for 20 years. You know what I mean? Drafting in a way and players that don't look to be on people's boards in the same way because of how he wants to utilize them in some way. And that is his gift. That's why he's going to the Hall of Fame, and that's why trophies will be named after him, but probably not his boss, unless it's phallic, I would think at this point. How about that, dude? We don't do the TMZ thing around here, and quite frankly, I mean, what people do in their sex life is up to them, except when they're hiring, Chinese, slaves, essentially. I mean, it's an outrageous thing, and I don't know how, day after day, week after week, year after year, I had somebody on my Facebook who I respect a lot, who I like a lot, who I know at one point liked sports a lot, said this is why I don't support sports anymore. You know what I mean? I'm just like, when the billionaires can't just, do something without hiring Chinese slaves, you know what I mean? When you don't have any integrity at all about that kind of stuff, when you're a billionaire and you're flaunting it out in front of the league, I think it dismays a lot of people. It's not the news your mom would want to hear about Steve Bisciotti. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a terrible look. Look, are there plenty of older men out there men of various ages who partake in illegal activity along the lines of prostitution? Yeah, I mean and look, I'm not even going to try to judge that.
I'm not even judging the act. I'm just sort of judging the entire sort of this was really stupid thing to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing that comes to mind for me. I mean, and we talk about this all the time with athletes, and Roger Goodell has even been quoted, and we've seen commissioners in the various sports quoted that owners should be held to a higher expectation, a higher degree of grace and integrity.
I've said that about Peter Angelos for 25 years.
Sure,
and people only agree with that until such point where they go and buy a ticket. You know what I mean?
Well,
then it's like, it is what it is. I mean, you either support it or you don't. And look, we're all going through that. We talked about Bob Costas last week, right? And I'm sure, and by the way, can I promote Wednesday night? Just I'll throw it in and let you get on your Bob crap. But Wednesday night, I have all of this cool stuff that I've collected. And believe me, there's not enough hours on the internet or time for Luke to sit here. But we're going to go through some old school stuff and have some fun with that. But, part of that is we are tied to Orioles magic from you sitting on your dad's lap and loving sports for all that. That if you come in the side door and you sort of look at it at 100,000 feet and blackballing players and the baseball owners colluding against these players now and Adam Jones can't get a gig. And, we just go through all – you don't need a shower, dude. You need a freaking car wash. You know what I mean? In order to feel like you want to give your money to this, and it's sort of kind of on the up and up. And that's even when they get the calls right at the end of the season, right? Like, all of these leagues are under siege to some degree for something, but they don't need their owners, buying Chinese slaves in houses of ill repute. I mean, it's just not the headline you want on a Friday for your league.
Of course not. I mean, like I said, it's a terrible look. It's embarrassing. I think, and look, I'm not going to sit here and say that Robert Kraft, let's face it, I mean, this story comes down to a rich, dirty old man wanting, getting his jollies with something that, is has a certain perception, but there is a very serious story going on here. And look, his degree of knowledge or involvement in it beyond just
that's the place down the corner, right?
Customer,
yes,
but human trafficking is a horrible, horrible crisis. Quite frankly, I mean, I know Benjamin Watson is someone who, in the My Cleats, My Choice initiative that NFL players, he has chosen to be an advocate against that and to be a voice, basically singing how much of a problem this is. This is a global crisis. So as much as and look, I've been as guilty of it as anyone of, a couple jokes about Robert Kraft individually and massage parlors and all that. There's a very serious, dark, heinous story here that goes beyond the owner of the New England Patriots. I assume he is not the mastermind behind everything that went on there, but for him to be tied to this, for the NFL to be tied to this, it's awful. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. Not that I feel at all sorry for the New England Patriots.
Bobby didn't have any problem going out to the Oscars party out in L.A. on Saturday night.
Yeah.
But, I said to my wife, boy, he's not going to be at the Biltmore in 6 weeks, right? Like, I mean, he's not going to show up at the owners' meetings. Maybe he will. I don't.
Who knows?
I mean, who knows what this circus is? And my wife just looked at me. She's like, "This is sort of like Andy Rooney getting a Hummer at this point." Like it's just sort of like the dude's 85 years old. Yeah. He's got $1 billion. He doesn't really care. I mean, I guess. I mean, but
right.
It feels to me like he saw a lot of people. Like I've been in his presence. Luke, I've been in his presence 40 or 50 times. He is not the reclusive Peter Angelos guy. You know what I mean? He's not a guy that I've been in Peter Angelos' presence 3 times in my life. I've been in the same room with Peter Angelos 3 times in 25 years. I've been in a room with Robert Kraft 40 times in 20 years. Like, I see Robert Kraft a lot. He's walked through the press box many times in Foxborough over the years. Like, I know him a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, so he's not a hiding kind of guy. I don't know that it's going to change anything. Based on the fact that he was going to Oscars parties on Saturday night, I think he's going to write the check, do the time, count his rings, and, not going to let it kill him the way it did Jerry Richardson. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's hard to say.
And I don't think Roger's going to do anything about it, by the way.
Well, Roger works for the owners. I mean, that's what's so amusing about these commissioners that try to speak as though they're an objective third party that wants the best for the game. I mean, they're always...
I speak in the best interest of the game as long as the owners are making money.
Yeah. But it comes down to this, Ness. I mean, look, are there great owners in the history of professional sports that we remember fondly? Yes. Are there heinous owners who move franchises or were involved in scandals, et cetera? Yes. When it really comes down to it, most fans, they'd rather their owner remain in the background and not hinder their experience as a fan. And I don't know what the final verdict in this is going to be. I don't know what other information is going to come out. Like I said, there's a very serious story to this, whereas the Robert Kraft participation in this, to this point, has almost been more of a punchline for most people, and it's embarrassing, clearly.
You know what's crazy is like fans that hate the Patriots are flocking to this spa and taking selfies in front of it to shame him. So, that's the price to pay. But to your point, going back to the first part of this that you and I bring up, it's not him, it's not the league, it's not this story has been about trafficking, human trafficking, and that's if that's the upshot of this, is that we're all more aware of this, good. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there that have utilized these services that maybe should be thinking about this a little bit differently, given where their mothers and their sisters and their wives and their daughters are, right? Kind of, sort of.
No question at all. So,
I'm all for two people, conducting whatever they want to conduct as adults. I'm fine with that. This is a whole different story here and a whole different way of looking at it that certainly as a 50-year-old, I probably didn't look at it that way as a 40 or 30 or 20-year-old to say that's what's going on there. But that is what's going on there.
Right. And again, these clients, including Robert Kraft, to what degree were they aware of the circumstances of what was going on there, whether they just thought these were employees, or were they, and let's call it a spade, slaves? And that's what it was. I mean, that's, or at least that's what the charges and the early reports indicated to be. So, what's their degree of culpability here, degree of knowledge of what was actually happening there? I have no idea. But again, there is a very, beyond the punchlines and just the overall embarrassment of Robert Kraft and embarrassment to the league, there's a very serious crimes, crimes against humanity here being committed that shouldn't be lost sight of, even if we're speaking about this more in the lens of what does this mean for the Patriots? What does this mean for Kraft? What does it mean for the National Football League?
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke, and Luke at WNST.net. I'm going to be telling you about all of our sponsors around here, including our friends at Curio Wellness Center in Timonium, the holistic spa with the top-of-the-line products with experienced pros, professional-grade vitamins, herbal supplements, and yes, they know about cannabis. They're there to educate you. Brian is here. Brian is there. Stop by and see our friends at Curio Wellness. You can learn more at CurioWellness.com. Also, our friends King Discount Liquors, lottery beer, booze, and the best prices in Baltimore. I am out of Malbec. This is a major problem around here, especially when I'm having delicious food and leftovers that come my way. I need to get some wine. I need some stout for sure. I got to get over to Rosedale, give the King a ring. I got to get up with Paul King. He's got a big bull roast going on in April. We're going to be telling you more about that. I'm going to be participating in, so I'll get that out as well. King Discount Liquors in Rosedale. Also, our friends down in Pasadena. I almost found myself in Pasadena over the weekend. I was in Glen Burnie. If you saw me on Ritchie Highway, it was me. But I was not headed to Compass Point because it was not a good day for golf. But when the weather is good, you can still hit the ball at Compass Point. Of course, Robert Kennedy's going to be here talking Terps with us all week long. You can find him at Buckets and Birds. And if you're putting together any golf outing for your group, just a small group, just want to put some dates on the calendar, you can do that at Compass Point and find my man Robert Kennedy down there to do that as well. Last but never least, our friends at the Modell Lyric. I got to scream that Kansas is playing on Friday night. George Lopez this week as well. $29.50 for George Lopez. You want to get out to see the Wall Show. I've heard great things about that. We had George on the program. I've had two guys from Kansas on. I can't have Frank Zapp on, but I might have Dweezil on soon. They're doing a hologram show at the Modell Lyric on May 3rd, so I'm looking forward to that as well. We had Tom Johnson from the Doobie Brothers on. If you missed that last week, you can find that in the buyatoyota.com audio vault. The Doobie Brothers date is April the 12th. I've had an awesome time at the Modell Lyric. If you did not see my John Mellencamp videos or the pictures, Mellencamp rocked it last week. And the week before that, I had an unbelievable night with the Manhattans and the Delphonics down there. It was a big, big night. So big thanks to the Modell Lyric. Also, Bill Maher on June 9 and JoJo Siwa on June the 12th. There is always magic at the Modell Lyric. And I love them, and I want to make sure that you love them too. Come downtown. We need you downtown. The Baltimore Positive Movement is a couple of weeks away from launching. Certainly by the time the baseball season gets going, we will have it going. Our Baltimore Positive initiatives, I'm talking more about ways to make the city better, and that's the most important thing. The buyatoyota.com audio vault is there 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. The morning newspaper delivers digitally to your email inbox at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, as well as our friends at the Maryland Jockey Club and Laurel, where they have expanded Laurel. They have the sports bar down there. I know there's been a lot of conjecture about Preakness. I'll be weighing in on that in the coming weeks as well, and hopefully having some of the officials from the Maryland Jockey Club on as well. And a big get well to my dear friend Bob Leffler, who was fallen ill. So if you've got a thought out there for Bob, give Bob a note, a thought, a kind word. So Bob Leffler, man about town. We've known him a long time around here. Get well soon, Bob. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube, WNSTV channel. And don't forget, if you want breaking news, I have no idea what's going to happen with Weddle and Yonda, and certainly CJ Mosley will get it first on the WNST Tech Service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis is here on Thursday. We're not going to the Combine. I am a conscientious objector of all things Indianapolis this year. And I'm a little upset that Steve Bisciotti hasn't had his State of the Union, so I'll be addressing that as I head to the owners' meetings next month. But I am a very available individual, and I'm doing all sorts of stuff around here, including trying to make the city better. I'm Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.